Data and social media influence.
You are becoming a magnet. You're attracting opportunities. So, yes, if you have a job and you're happy, great. But it's sort of like they say, hunting for your next meal before you're hungry.
Welcome to the Data Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, Nisar Ahmed. Join me as we explore the inner data nerd inside all of us. Dive into the world of data alongside special guests who not only share their wealth of experience and knowledge, but also unveil what truly makes them data nerds. This podcast is brought to you by Business Intelligence. That's BIZNIS Intelligence. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Business Intelligence to stay up to date with Tableau training and the Data Nerd podcast. Connect with me on LinkedIn or stream the Data Nerd podcast across all major podcast platforms. Welcome to the Data Nerd podcast. I have a pleasure of meeting or introducing Kate Strachnia. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it Strachnia?
You actually are. Yes. Thank you,
Oh,
Nisar.
awesome. I got it. I got it. I didn't even run that by you beforehand. So great, great. So Kate is the founder of the DATAcated, a media company focused on helping companies reach their audience by amplifying their brand and expertise in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science. Kate is the author of Colorwise, a data storyteller's guide to the intentional use of color. She is a LinkedIn learning instructor with several courses focused on personal branding and data careers. LinkedIn top voice in data science and analytics for both 2018 and 19, and on the Data IQ USA 100 list. So welcome, Kate, to the Data Nerd podcast.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
No, I'm excited to have you on. And you're one of the people when I started my journey doing podcasts. I was like, one day I need to get Kate on, and it's happening. So I'm
It's
excited.
happening.
It's
Yay.
happening. Yes. So before we start, this being the Data Nerd podcast, I do like to ask all my guests an introductory question, and that
Okay.
is, are you a data nerd?
I
And
am a data nerd, Nisar.
okay,
Yes.
you are a data nerd, and I assumed no other answer for that. But my question to you is, tell me your story when you realized you were a data nerd.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't start out, I wasn't born a data nerd. I was actually
Mm,
born into finance, risk management, and regulatory compliance and consulting for financial services. It's a mouthful, but that's what I used to do before I fell in love with data. I think I realized I was a data nerd in about 2013, 2014, so a little over 10 years ago, when I was looking for a career change. And I was really open into anything that would keep me working from home. I was expecting my first child, and the consulting life on the road life does not mesh well with a newborn that you actually want to see grow up. So I was looking internally at a consulting firm where I was working, and they gave me a role. They're like, this is data insights and strategy. You'll use Tableau. At that point, I had no idea what was Tableau. I barely even used Excel for data analytics, right? I didn't really use data at all.
mm,
And I just went full force. I'm like, okay, if I want to keep this internal gig working from home, back then this was not the norm. Nobody really worked from home.
mm,
Um, and so I decided to just go full force. I took online courses like Coursera, data science. I started a Humans of Data Science podcast to interview people to try to understand this whole world of data analytics, data science. I built my own Tableau Public profile with dashboards. And I think it was somewhere around that point where I absolutely fell in love with data. And it's been it's been almost 10, yeah, a little over 10 years now that all I do is think about data, talk about data, interview
mm.
people about data. Literally, my license plate of my car
Yeah.
is data. DATA. Nothing before,
Wait,
nothing after. No.
nobody's taken that license plate before?
No.
Wow.
No, isn't that crazy?
That's
So
crazy. I know. I gotta
if
see.
that
And
tells you anything.
you have a New Jersey license plate, right?
I do, yes.
Okay, so I gotta see if the New York one is taken.
Try to get it. Yeah.
Doesn't hurt to look it up and try.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And as you're talking, a lot of similarities. Okay, I've been in data for, my education was in data, But
Mm.
similar to you, my career took a turn when I started using Tableau, and mine was about 8 years ago. And so that really like changed my career trajectory and my love for data because, and I don't know about you, but for me, um, what Tableau allows me to do is really use both my data skills and my like artistic ability and merge them together to create something that I really love to do and like to present and show. Is that the same for you? Do you have that artistic side as well?
Yeah, and you know what happened was when I was using Tableau for work, we had very specific data sets to work on, right? They would say we need a dashboard for this, management reporting, whatever.
Yeah.
And what I noticed myself when I really realized this was it for me was when I started working on data visualization projects and dashboards outside of work. So I think when you start to do things like that, then you
Yeah.
know this is what you're meant to do for your the rest of your life. Because I would participate in the Makeover Mondays, I think almost every week. If for those who don't know, Makeover Monday is a project where they share a weekly data set and you basically get to recreate a visualization and then I was inspired by so many others. And yeah, it absolutely allowed me to work within my creative side and my analytical side to pair those two together and the ability to tell a story. It is
Yeah.
just so much fun.
Yeah. And it always helps when you love what you do, right?
Yeah.
And I think you and I are both grateful that we got into tools such as Tableau. But it doesn't have to be just Tableau only, right? There are other tools out there. Um, but whatever that is, whatever catches your joy, your attention is really what will allow you to kind of grow in your career. Because when you love what you do, I think
Yeah.
people see that in your work as well.
Yeah, actually, funny story. So after my love with Tableau, I actually did end up exploring, I think, every single data visualization tool out there, like
Yeah.
Click, Power BI, Data Wrapper, Canva, anything you can think of. I've experimented with. I built courses for it, tutorials, Domo, Pyramid Analytics, ThoughtSpot, anything to do with data visualization, business intelligence, analytics. And then that sort of exploded into me being interested in all things data, not like beyond data visualization. So data architecture, data engineering, data science, just everything and anything related to data, and now AI as well, of course.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's kind of like the next wave, right? I think that's where
Yeah.
all the focus is being driven towards is um the AI movement, right?
Yep.
Um so talk about, your social media presence, right? So you're a content creator and you have, over 200,000 followers across platforms like LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram. And you have a DATAcated Plus program,
Yes.
which is with 25 plus influencers that can be hired to make a splash. Talk about what do you mean by like what is this? What do you mean by making a splash?
Yeah, I'll just so let's start at the beginning. So DATAcated is a media company, right? So I work with clients like IBM, Tableau, actually, Salesforce, SAP, Intel, Alteryx, ThoughtSpot, and 120 other brands that I've worked with since March 2020 when I started the company. And essentially the way we partner is almost always different, but similar in the fact that I'm helping them with content creation, content amplification, um, LinkedIn live sessions, newsletters, email blasts, posts, helping share a message like if there's an event coming up or a webinar or an ebook or a product launch, right? Anything like that, I help them support it. Now, the way the Dedicated Plus program was born was very fortunately for me, DATAcated was very busy. People saw the value of influencer marketing, especially if you have a community that actually cares about what you have to say. And they're very, all of my followers, subscribers, buddies are data people in one way or another. They're either in industry working with data or they're selling data or they're working with data. And those brands would love to talk to those individuals. So what happened was I was getting so busy and I had all of these like influencer buddies, content creator buddies that would love to create content, but were not maybe receiving as many requests from clients. So I built this Dedicated Plus program where companies can now hire, over 25 influencers at a time, or they can do two or three influencers from that list of individuals And it streamlines the process where now the client doesn't have to have a conversation with every influencer, get an understanding, are they real, right? Talking about AI, you never know if you're talking to a real
Yeah.
person online. Um, so they're sort of vetted by DATAcated to make sure that they're not only real, but create great content. And I know all of them very personally for people who want to hire more influencers. It's definitely a great place to look.
So how did you get into this? Like, do you, I'm assuming you coach these influencers as well and how to be effective?
No, they're all
No?
amazing in their own way. So
Okay.
that's the best part. They're all doing their own thing. For the most part, they all have full-time jobs and they do this sort of as a side gig, a fun way to maybe share some piece of news with their audience and monetize it in a way. So no, I don't provide coaching. They all have their own styles, they all have their own creative outlets. So the
Mm.
way I got started with content was actually thanks to Tableau,
Yeah.
which is interesting. It all comes full circle, and it was by accident. So going back to about 10 years ago,
Hmm.
when I told you I was trying to really make sure I secured that internal role,
Yeah.
I tried everything. So I started studying for the Tableau, was it desktop associate exam or something, one of those basic exams in the beginning. And I made a post on LinkedIn. Back then, LinkedIn wasn't really a content platform, right? People were not posting as much as they are now.
Yeah.
So I posted that I was studying for this exam, and that's pretty much what I said. Like I left it open for any advice or helpful tips. And people started being nice. They were encouraging. They were like, hey,
Mm.
here's a resource I used, or good luck. And those 4 or 5 comments is really what led me to where I am today because I realized that there is a real community on these platforms, that people are actually nice and they care. And
Mm.
so as my journey went on and I would learn and grow personally, I would basically do it publicly. And I documented my journey on social media. So more people would start to follow. And that's sort of how that following was built.
And I think my experience on LinkedIn is very similar from the standpoint that I find that it's a very positive feedback
Yeah.
that you get on LinkedIn. It's not like some other, like, other platforms where, like Instagram or whatnot. Sometimes, you look at the comments and they're not, always the most wholesome type of comments. But on LinkedIn, I find, I probably use LinkedIn more than any other app or social media platform for a number of reasons. One is it's a great place to get feedback and network, and also like it's a way to learn. Like you learn
Yeah.
from others. There's so much content out there that you can learn from. And so my journey, like when I started my podcast like a year ago, um, I started off by creating like the Tableau YouTube training, right? And then I kind of branched out into podcasts as well. I'm like, I have this channel. Let me start podcasts and talk about various data topics, right? And
Yeah.
now it kind of led me to be selected as a Tableau social ambassador, which I never thought. If you were to ask me this like 10 years ago, I'd be like, no way. Like I hated public speaking. I hated presentations. I was a very shy person. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
hated. I feared it. I feared it. I think
Yeah.
that's what it was. I had to overcome that fear to kind of get past that. And now I'm like, I wish I had done it sooner. I think sometimes we're harsher critic of ourselves than
Yeah.
others are of us. And so I feel like a lot of people in data feel the same way because a lot of people get into it because they like the technical side and they're good technically speaking. But sometimes they don't focus on some of those soft skills or communication. And maybe that fear is there for them as well.
Yeah.
And so if you're providing any type of advice to people who want to get on social media, maybe do you start just posting on LinkedIn? Like what advice would you give to kind of get yourself out there and why is it important?
Yeah, I would start by saying that fear is a very real thing, and I absolutely faced it myself several times when I was starting out. Actually, one of the first times was when I was learning Tableau, and my manager at the time, she's like, "Hey, why don't we pitch our project to go on to the Tableau conference, and again, this is like 10 years ago, and we
Mm.
could share our story on stage about how we're using Tableau internally because we were, bringing Tableau through every channel we could into that company. And so we had a great story. And when she told me this, I'm like, oh God, I hope we don't get selected because I do not want to go on stage and talk about anything ever.
Yeah.
And another time when I was asked to be on the podcast, one of the first times, it was to share my journey about learning data. And again, I was like, oh my God, no. I almost canceled last minute. It was like we were right about to start. I was gonna tell the guy, no, I can't do it. So the fear is very real. And I think the way I approached it was to just do it scared and see what happens.
Mm.
Um, and it turned out great because with every time that you do it, you just get, I don't know if you get better or more comfortable or both, but
Yeah.
it definitely helps to just throw yourself into that pool, metaphorically speaking, and see what happens. Because worst case, right, you stumble on a couple words, and who cares? People are human. They actually don't mind it if you do. No, nobody wants to listen to a robotic, scripted conversation. I think they prefer
Exactly.
this.
Yes,
Oh,
yes. You're right. Um,
so
yeah,
I
go ahead.
think yeah, your question was how to get started. I
Yeah.
think I think LinkedIn or YouTube or any social media platform is a great way to get yourself out there. And I think for people who are maybe too scared to start with, probably the scariest thing is coming up with a live video or some kind of big production. A small text post or even a comment on someone else's post is already a fantastic way to start. When I do some of these talks, like podcast conversations, I always say this is a great opportunity for your first post. If you learned anything in this conversation, or from watching any of the other podcast episodes that you're doing, if you're learning something, take a screenshot of yourself listening, or just of your phone if you're listening on the phone. That could be your post. Share your three bullet point takeaways of what you learned. Tag the speakers. Most people have enough time to, comment and respond to you. And you're building relationships that way as well. So it shouldn't be that difficult. I think people do overanalyze and then they're like, oh, I don't have time for this. It takes me a week to come up with a post.
Yes.
I don't know. I have the opposite problem. I have a million things I want to post today, and I could probably only post one because otherwise my engagement will decrease, right, for all my other
Yeah.
content.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that advice. Like you go to a conference, you hear a speech,
Yeah.
you post about, or summarize it, or what are your key takeaways, and then you tag the speakers. And once you do that, what that does, it automatically grows your audience, right? Because when you tag, like if I'm ta tagging you, everyone in your network will see the post as well.
Especially if I like it and engage. And if it's a
Yeah.
genuine post that you made, right, that you actually learned something. Of course, as a speaker, I think no matter how many talks you've given, you always want to hear feedback. Like, did someone learn something? Because you'd be surprised how few people would actually, reach out or say, hey, I learned something, it impacted me. Most people listen to a talk and they're like, great, I have a takeaway. And then they go home and then they probably don't do anything at all.
Mm.
Or maybe they take action, but they do it in silence. And I think if you can do so publicly, you're right. You make friends, you build relationships, and you do grow your network because now if the speakers start engaging on your post, then their audience starts to see that as well, and it has the snowball effect.
I told myself, and this was before I started my podcast or YouTube training channel or whatnot. This is like when I was just trying to engage on LinkedIn. I I used to travel into work every day in New York City, and I used to take the train. I would say on every train ride, my goal was to at least comment on one person's post every day. And so what ha ends up happening is when you comment, even if you're not creating the content yourself, your name gets out there on people's feed. And the people you're commenting on kind of get to know who you are, right? And so
Absolutely.
you're not this unknown person anymore. And
Yeah.
then when you start doing your own thing or creating content, or maybe even just trying to get guests on your own podcast or collaborate with people, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I know who you are.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with your work." Because just because you're commenting, you're not even creating content. But
Yeah, exactly.
but I also feel like, and I went through this as well. when I started working in Tableau, um, I loved it, but I wouldn't say I was an expert in Tableau. But my
Yeah.
first project that I created had a huge impact at the company I worked with. And so other people wanted to learn it as well. And so I started teaching them. But what ended up happening was, I don't know if you heard of General Assembly. Uh,
Yeah.
yes.
I
So I got an offer to teach their analytics course at General Assembly because I had that knowledge of Tableau. And at that point, I was still like less than a year into Tableau. And I was not sure that I was qualified to teach, but I still took it on. I had an imposter syndrome, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And it took me a long time to kind of get over that hurdle. It took a lot of preparation to teach it. But what I ended up realizing is that as long as you know more than the students you're teaching, you have something to give or some input and from your experience. And you can always learn. Like I had to learn before I teach. And it also kind of sharpened my skills as well. And when I went through that first cohort, I was like, you know what? I really like this and I think I can do this. And then that's where
Mhm.
I kind of continued on with my teaching and now, helped my career and also allowed me to create this YouTube channel and podcast just because of that starting from taking on that challenge that I thought I couldn't do.
It's interesting how much of a overlap our stories have because I had a couple of instances early on where I was contacted to help facilitate a data science and machine learning course for a very prestigious college, which I'm like, I don't even know machine learning, but sure, let's try it, right? It
Yeah.
came with a handbook, so I was able to sort of learn as I went. And similarly for teaching a Tableau at big conferences, I had like these 2-day workshops and teaching at Citibank and some of these other places. And the first few times they're like, hey, we think you should teach this. I'm like, I can facilitate, which means, walk around and help. They're like, no, no, we think you should teach. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, if they believe I can do it, maybe I can do it. So I got up there. I fell in love with it because I realized I do know this stuff, right? And you're
Yeah.
right. As long as you know this much more than the class, you already can provide value. You can teach. And I realized as I was teaching that people are still, trying to build their first chart, and which is very easy for me to teach because I had a few years of experience at that time. I think a lot of people do feel like, okay, I'm never going to be ready.
Yeah.
And the same for content creation, right? A lot of times people tell me, I'm just a beginner, or what do I know that these other million people that are already posting don't know? And my answer to you is you have your own unique experience and your own unique perspective. So if you're working at in a different industry, you have already a different perspective on the different projects out there. If you're a beginner, well, other beginners actually want to hear from you versus the person who's been doing this for 10 years, where they already know everything and don't even remember the struggles of being a beginner. So I think wherever you are, that's actually the story that you should be focused on versus trying to learn as much as you can and share as if you're an expert. We don't need that many experts. We need people at different stages to share their stories.
That's right. Sometimes you want to hear from people who are at the same level as you are and
Yeah,
hear their experiences, right?
yeah.
So then
Mhm.
at what point can you, that's my next question. Like, how much knowledge do you need before you start really getting yourself out there or creating content? Do you like,
Wherever you are now is perfectly fine. I think if you're just not even working in data, your first piece of content could be, I'm trying to get a job in data analytics. Here's what I've tried, or here's what I'm working on. Share your advice, right? You can be the person asking the right questions, get 5 comments, and now those 5 comments can be your next little article. Like here's what Robert had to say, and he's been doing this for a few years. Interview other people who have that knowledge and be the person who can share that with your audience. That's sort of how I started was, with my Humans of Data Science YouTube channel. I interviewed anyone and everyone from people who are just becoming a student in a country across the world somewhere, or people who have been doing this for 50 years and are the founders of data science, or like I even got to interview the chief data scientist from the White House just because I asked, right? Like, don't be
yeah,
afraid to ask people for that interview.
That's
You might
great.
get a no, but you might get a yes, right? If you keep asking. So
Yeah, I mean, what's the worst case scenario? You'll say, like you won't hear back, right? I mean, so
yeah,
you're not really losing anything from asking. Um,
yeah,
that's kind of
exactly.
how I got you on here too.
Yeah,
I
you
asked,
asked.
I
You
asked.
asked. You said all the right things, man. So like, okay, let's do it.
Talk about like some of the different platforms. Like, what's the best platform to kind of put yourself out there? Would it be LinkedIn? Is it YouTube or Instagram? Like, or are there differences in the type of content you would create based on the platform you're using?
Yeah, I think a good place to start is where you actually consume content. If you don't like LinkedIn for one reason or another, don't create content there. I think creating content where you actually consume content is great because then you know what you like, so you'll know what other viewers of that platform would like. Like if you're on TikTok all day, then focus your content on the TikTok platform. Being aware of where your audience lives is also important, but asking yourself first, why are you creating content, right? Are you trying to be known by a certain community at a certain platform? And if they live on LinkedIn, then yes, maybe you should create content on LinkedIn. Some of the nuances, I would say is LinkedIn is great for 24-hour content. What I mean by that is if I post right now, it's 9 a.m. Eastern, then by tomorrow around this time, that content is old news. And if you're comfortable with that, then great. I love that because then I get to keep pushing things out. People do remember it, but it's no longer like promoted to
Yeah.
my followers. If you want more evergreen content, then I would say, Medium articles, Substack articles, even LinkedIn articles can live on longer. YouTube is great because it's always searchable. I think content that I've created 8 years ago with my videos, my Tableau tutorials and things like that are
Mm.
still performing better than some of my newer content today. And that's just because it's searchable and it's solving a problem. So people can continue to watch that content. Um, and I think it's important to start with one platform because then it's easier to grow the others if your goals are to be like an actual content creator and be, building a personal brand across multiple platforms. It gets overwhelming because you're like, okay, I can create on TikTok and Twitter and Twitch and Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube and Reddit and it gets overwhelming and that's when people are like, okay, I have no time, let's give up. So I think if I had to pick all over again right now, it would
Mm.
be LinkedIn and I would post about 3 to 5 times a week. Could be a short post, a little mini article. It could be a picture with some text, a poll, something simple that gets me present. And also, engaging with any comments you get and engaging with comments from your friends online as well.
Do you think writing articles or written LinkedIn posts are better than videos on LinkedIn or more effective?
Define better and define effective. What are you trying to do?
Engagement?
Engagement is in impressions, comments, likes. Which one are you looking for?
All of the above.
So I would say, like, let's compare a video, a 3-minute video, where let's say you're talking about your journey into data analytics, right?
Mm.
And then let's compare that with a short text post that says the same thing essentially with a couple of bullets.
Yeah.
I think the text post will get more views, right? If you look at number of impressions, it'll get more views simply by the way that the LinkedIn algorithm counts a view, right? A person glanced at it, paused, and maybe kept going.
Yeah.
So that's impressions. For a video, people have to watch at least a couple of seconds. I think it's like 15. I don't know exactly how many seconds to
Mm.
be considered a view. So you might get less views, but guess what? The people who watch your actual video will
Mm.
really get to know you, right? They'll at least be convinced that they think they know you well because they
Yeah.
watched a 3-minute video or even a minute of it. They feel like they've interacted with you as a person more than looking at some words. So that's why I said it depends what you're looking for. Like if you're trying to really build that stronger connection with people of who you really are and what kind of content you produce, video. If you're trying to just get the quick hits and just get your name out there, I think the written part. But the best thing is you don't have to pick, right? You can do a video today and a written one tomorrow, or do
Yeah.
a video with the writing on top. Post 5 times a day if you want. Who cares, right? No, there are no actual rules out there.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Maybe what I would say is maybe if you're new to creating content, is maybe you start off with the written, even to kind of just put yourself out there, and then eventually get to video. I think usually that's You very rarely see people post videos who have not already created
It's
written
scary.
content. It's
Yeah.
scary. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is. Why is it important? Like,
The video?
no, like, so we talked about getting yourself out there on social media like if somebody comes to me and says, okay, like I'm good at my job and I like to do what I'm doing, what benefit will I get from creating content on social media? Like, what am I getting out of that?
You are becoming a magnet. You're attracting opportunities. So yes, if you have a job and you're happy, great. But it's sort of like they say, hunting for your next meal before you're hungry, right?
Yeah.
So making sure that people are aware of who you are, what you do. You might be amazing internally at your company. I think the more comfortable and secure you feel, the less secure you really are. And that might be my pessimistic way of looking at things. But I
Yeah.
have several friends who have lost their jobs, out of the blue because the company shifted their strategy or lost money, right? It's something that they really cannot control, no matter how good they are. And yes, you might be able to get a job really quickly based on your skills, but if nobody knows about you or your skills, it's tougher. You're going through those resume portals, you're submitting you're working with recruiters, unless you're really at the top of the top and people just know you by name. And
Yeah.
guess what? That happens with your personal brand, right? People actually have to know you. And in order for them to know you, I think content is just such a great way to make you into this magnet. What happened to me early on is I would start posting right on LinkedIn and I realized the power of it where people started reaching out to me for everything. Do you need
Mm.
a new job? At least a couple times a month. A new job was like landing in my LinkedIn mailbox because they would see I'm constantly posting about Tableau this and dashboard that and data visualization and all these other platforms and I kept saying like, no, no, not looking, not really. And then like consulting gigs and hey, do you want to do Tableau training? Do you want to write a book? Do you want to talk on stage? Do you want to speak here? We'll send you to this conference. And things just started coming at me. And at that point, I'm like, wow, this is really powerful. And
How
I
long
even
did that
asked one
take?
person,
Like, how long into your journey did that, like, getting
I
your?
would say about 2 years in, and I wasn't really doing it intentionally to get those results. It just sort of happened. I wasn't setting out to do content. I was just sharing my journey. But I think the more people see you, the more they start to associate you with the thing that you talk about. So I think that's important that when you're starting out to define your personal brand, like what do you want people to actually think of when they see your name? At that point for me it was data visualization, dashboarding. Now it's more like personal branding, brand amplification, marketing. I'm sort of shifting, and you can always shift your personal brand over time. Just by the more you talk about that thing, the more people are going to think about you when they think about that thing, and
Yeah.
vice versa.
No, it's true. And I think being consistent also is a huge part, right? It's not
Yeah.
just you post one video and then you wait a few months and then do another one, right? It's tough though, because when you have a full-time job and you're
Yes.
busy, it does take work. Like, creating these podcasts is not like we talked about this before we started recording this. It's this part, us talking and recording is the easiest part of this podcast production. The work is going to come post recording and putting the podcast together, right? And it takes work and it takes time. Um, and so I feel like you need to kind of make time for that as well, right? Like carve out some time to say, all right, I'll spend, an hour a day or an hour every other day for this purpose.
And I really don't think you need that much time. Maybe I'm oversimplifying things, but it doesn't really take me that much time to, at this point, even make a video, right? I think with the tools we have, and maybe we spend a minute or two on some of the tools that can benefit your audience if they're trying to create content.
Yeah.
I have some recommendations. Like for something like what we're doing right now,
Yeah.
I don't know if you use Descript. Have you tried that one?
I've heard of it, no, but
Oh
yeah.
my God. Okay. I'm about to blow your mind. This is the
Okay.
best tool you ever use for podcasts, for video editing. So
Okay.
for people who've edited videos before, let's say you're recording a video of you talking about your latest Tableau project and you built this and blah blah blah, the data you used. And you did a couple of takes. Like you have your camera rolling, you're
Mhm.
talking to your camera, you do a retake, you take a break, you pause, you say you check your notes. you have filler words, and then 30 minutes later, you end the recording, even though all you needed was a 5-minute clip. You drop that into Descript,
Mhm.
Descript, Descript.
Mhm.
And it's going to generate like a Google Doc sort of or Word doc version of your video with the video on top, words down here.
Mhm.
There are a couple buttons you can click. One button, remove awkward pauses. It'll remove every silence, like make it natural, right?
Yep.
Half a second or whatever. Next, remove all filler words. Any uhs, ums, whatever sounds you made, removed. And it'll remove them not only from the text, but also from the video portion of it.
Yep.
If you did a couple of retakes, click the button that says remove any retakes and keep the best one. It'll do that all for you. And this is within seconds. This is not like
Yeah.
one at a time. It will just clean up your whole document. And then it exports it for you. There are so many other features like voice isolation and enhancement, and it doesn't have to take hours, is my point. Like that's just one tool of a couple that I use.
Yeah. Yeah. I use another tool. It's called Veed.io, and they have a lot of similar features as well.
Yeah.
With a
It's
few
getting
different.
easier for
It
sure.
is getting easier. Maybe it's just the perfectionist in me.
Yeah, if you're really hard on yourself, then obviously it'll take you longer. I
Yeah.
think I kept mine usually like my conversations are more casual. So for my live shows, there's zero editing. It is what it is. Like
Yeah.
whatever we record is going to be it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, this is great. Great advice for people who are, looking to get their presence known and on social media. Um, and we're talking about data, right? But it could be for any topic, really. It doesn't have to
absolutely.
be data, whatever your specialty is. So can you let us know how people can find out more information about you or reach out to you?
Yeah, so DATAcated.com is the website if people want to learn more about the media services and stuff. But generally, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for my name or look for the word DATAcated.
Great. I'll provide both in the description for this podcast in the show notes so people
Great.
can connect with you. And as far as you and I connecting, we're both in the same area, and so we got to meet up at some point.
Yes, we definitely will.
All right. Great. Kate, thank you so much for joining the Data Nerd podcast.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.